jewel. It's a pleasure for Carnival Australia and of CLIA's annual review of passenger growth. And it's a particular honour for P&O given its status as the home brand of Australian cruising, having pioneered cruise holidays from Australia more than 80 years ago. It's the second time P&O has had the opportunity to host this important event on the cruise industry calendar. This is a very exciting time also for CLIA and all of us involved in the cruise industry. These annual market reports underline the fact that Australia is an integral part of a global phenomenon. They also emphasise CLIA's expanded role in representing the cruise industry and providing a framework for further growth in this market. I know we're all eagerly awaiting the release of the latest figures from Gavin and Brett, and I, for one, feel confident that they will reflect the continuing popularity of cruising in Australia. We've achieved so many big things at so many levels. We're the most successful sector of Australian tourism. We generate more than $3 billion a year in economic activity. We've opened up more destinations and regional ports to the benefit of all of those ports and those regions. We have an extraordinarily long value chain, which so many share, from cab drivers to people whose food we buy on board the ships, and everybody else as well. It's attracting more brands, more ships and more itineraries. We're spreading our geographic wings into the Pacific and further north into Asia, but most importantly, we deliver the most wonderful holiday experience for everyone who travels on a ship. We still have plenty of challenges, however, and I won't go into this in any gory detail, but you've all heard this before. Well, we've made some progress in Sydney with the overseas passenger terminal being upgraded, and of course the operation here at White Bay. Garden Island is still on my radar and on our collective radar. Brisbane also has become a focal point as we've had so much growth and actually getting better facilities and facilities closer to the mouth of the river. But today is about the amazing growth. The growth over the last decade is our backdrop, and I think there is capacity for even more growth. As you know, a few years ago, we set an industry goal of carrying 1 million passengers by 2020. Last year we speculated we could get there by 2016. Well, to find out how we're tracking and the latest in our growth and to see just how close we are, it's my great pleasure to invite to the stage and ask you to welcome the Chairman of CLIA Australasia, Gavin Smith.
Well, good morning, thank you, Anne. And Tammy, where are you hiding? Hello, Tammy, thank you for your hospitality today. I haven't seen a six-pack like that since I got out of the shower this morning. So I felt good about myself standing there in the back, so a really warm welcome and thank you all very much. Just a few messages from me. I brought my glasses today, for those of you who worry about me wearing glasses. It's been another great year, and what I enjoy about an opportunity to come into a forum of stakeholders and supporters of the industry is that it's an opportunity to remind ourselves of what a great industry that we have the opportunity to work in. We've finished another record summer, and there's just announcement after announcement in recent weeks. Many of the brands are welcoming more ships into this part of the world and into their brands here in 2014 and 2015. So as we move today to talk in detail about the source market report, reflects not only the growth of the category but also the excitement of the category that we're all living through. What's important as you get the opportunity to digest the report is this is not about the nuts and bolts and the technicality of what we do in providing the world's most spectacular vacations. This is about our passengers and very simply about how many guests, how many passengers we carry, where we carry them, and not just locally but all around the world. One of the barometers for the cruise industry in Australia is the passion with which the Australian public is embracing the cruise industry. And it's indeed one of the key ingredients for our growth. And it's one of the intangible benefits of our coastal communities and the orientation towards the sea that's continuing to feed this fertile industry. It's many years, as you may recall, since the first release of industry data way back in 2002. What we have seen is just consistent growth. That has been one of the stories. Last year, from 2012, the size of the industry was 694,000 guests, 694,000 Australians who enjoyed a cruise holiday. So when we look to Australia in 2013, and all of the data has been compiled, we're now very, very pleased to announce that the figure for 2013 is contain your excitement. So 833,348 hardy souls made their way onto our many, many spectacular brands, both in and around Australia and around the world. That's a 2013 figure. It's impressive. It represents growth. It represents a 20.1% increase over the 2012 performance. So in any market, by any estimate, it's a wonderful achievement. The growth rate is leading the world. So 20.1% is the largest growth rate of any of the major cruise markets of the world. In fact, it's more than twice the level achieved in any of the other major cruise markets. Our numbers over the past 11 years have risen on average around 20% per annum, and we keep reinforcing ourselves with an ability to bring great product and well-priced cruise holidays here to Australia. Not only are we seeing a large number of Australians take cruises locally, but indeed the interest that we're generating here in the nursery of cruising is for Australians to be able to enjoy that experience worldwide. As we continue to grow as an industry, one of the figures that's very closely monitored by industry observers around the world is the market penetration rate. This is simply the number of cruise passengers divided by the population of the source market. Last year, when we talked about the 2012 figure, we explained that the penetration rate at 694,000 in 2012 was around 3% of the Australian population. That meant that at that time, from 2012, there were only two markets that were enjoying a penetration rate in excess of 3%, and that's ourselves and the USA. And the USA, as we know, is a very, very mature market with world's best product. The great news that in 2013, we've been able to amass our numbers and reach an amazing 3.6% of a penetration rate. This indeed makes the Australian cruise market the world leader. We are, a lot of excitement, am I right? Yeah. We are seeing relevance in Australian households that's never been achieved in another country, which means that as Australians wake up in the morning and consider their holiday alternatives to the months and years ahead, Australia is foremost in their mind. Cruising from Australia, cruising around the world is foremost in their mind. Enjoying the splendours of river and everything that our wonderful industry has to offer. So we've got some great messages. We're up over 800,000 passengers for 2013, growing in 2014, growing in 2015, growing in 2016. We have already published about forward deployments. It's 20.1% growth year on year, more than twice what any other major market in the world has been able to achieve. And we now lead the world in terms of our market penetration rate. Now it's our challenge to deliver on that opportunity, challenging ourselves as an industry to deliver world's best product and to continue to take as many Australians as we can on wonderful cruise holidays, both here and around the world. That's about it from me from this point. Brett will take you through some of the data in detail, and then we'll both be here for a bit of Q&A. If you'd like to spice it up a little bit after Brett. So thank you very much for your time this morning.
Well, good morning and thanks, Gavin. For those of you that are attending this presentation for the first time, a huge welcome. It's a good event. It's a great barometer of how we're travelling locally. What I'd just like to emphasise before I present some of the finer detail is just to remind you that this report is designed to measure source market data that highlights the size, the growth and the market penetration of domestic and outbound Australian cruise passenger numbers only. It's not intended to make any assertions in terms of inbound economic impact on Australia. So today, Australia remains firmly in the spotlight of the global cruise industry, thanks to the efforts of our member lines in supporting the value of this report. And as with recent years, we do have some fascinating material to share, which I'm sure will be of great interest to all of you. Before we look at the detail, I just want to reassure you all that the data displayed here will be given to you as part of a printed report before you leave. The printed report will actually go into far more detail than the high-level numbers that we focus on over the next 10 minutes or so. So please don't worry about trying to write everything down that I say. As Gavin has revealed, the number of Australian cruise passengers carried by CLIA member lines last year rose by 20% to a new record level of 833,348. The increase of almost 140,000 passengers is the second largest hike in annual real numbers since the industry report was first compiled in 2002. Over the past 10 years, Australian cruise passenger numbers have grown more than fivefold from a base of 154,000 in 2003, while in the last 5 years alone, there has been a 150% increase. The average annual growth rate over the past decade has been a very impressive 20%. So getting down to the detail, looking at where Australians chose to cruise in 2013, we can see that the most popular destination was again the South Pacific, which accounted for 40% of the market, now exceeding 330,000 passengers. With an increasing number of ships based in Australia seasonally and year-round, the local waters of Australia, New Zealand and the South Pacific once again proved the dominant destinations, collectively accounting for 70% of passenger numbers. Now, whilst we've seen a drop in the value of the Australian dollar, it still remains relatively favourable for long-haul travel. The robust dollar, combined with attractive itinerary options, made Europe ocean cruising the favoured destination in terms of growth, with the number of Australians exploring the Mediterranean and northern European oceans now representing 9% of Australians cruising. And as we can quickly see here, the market share for other key regions, including Asia at 5%, Alaska 3%, and the Caribbean, other Americas, and world voyages at around 2% each. Whilst cruising to the South Pacific once again attracted the most passengers, as I've just mentioned, the biggest percentage growth was achieved in Europe, with ocean cruise numbers rising 34%. Aside from Europe ocean cruising, the South Pacific rose 31%, and other standout performers in percentage terms show Asian ocean cruise demand making a comeback and increasing by 28%. River cruising continues to shine as a cruise option with 25% growth. Other American regions combined, that includes Hawaii, the New England, Bermuda, South America and Mexico, rose by 20%. The Caribbean rose 10%, and all other major regions experienced at least single-digit growth. Now, I'd just like to dig a little bit deeper into some of these regions. Let's start with the South Pacific. As mentioned, the South Pacific retained its dominance as the most popular destination for Australians in 2013, with a 31% rise on 2012 numbers, reflecting the continuing increase in local cruises to the region. In real terms, the region's passenger numbers have increased by over 100,000 in 2 years, and for the record, almost doubled compared to only 3 years ago, when 171,000 Australians cruised to the South Pacific. So here's the European story, and as you can see, the number of Europe ocean cruise passengers in 2013 reached 77,308, close to 20,000 passengers more than 2012, and a very healthy 34% increase. In your printed report, you will see Europe broken into 2 regions for ocean cruising, the Mediterranean and Northern Europe. The Mediterranean now ranks as the top long-haul destination for Australian cruises, attracting more than 57,000 passengers in 2013. This result translates to an increase of almost 30% on 2012 numbers of 44,796. The number of Australians cruising the Med has more than tripled in the last 4 years. Now, the significant growth in passenger numbers cruising Northern Europe has earned this region its own category for the first time in this report. In 2013, the waters of Norway, the Baltic and Russia attracted almost 20,000 Australians, surpassing other popular markets such as the Caribbean for the first time. This represents a 52% rise on last year's Northern Europe number of 12,923, as you will also see in your printed report. The appeal of river cruising continues to grow as the cruise style of choice for 6% of the Australian cruise passenger market, where total numbers have risen 25% in 2013 to just over 49,000. The growth of the category has now meant that we can expose distinct Europe and Asia river cruise data. In 2013, Europe river cruising numbers reached 41,800, a 24.4% increase on 2012 numbers of 33,612. Meanwhile, Asian river cruising attracted 4,511 passengers in 2013. This market is expected to expand in coming years as more operators introduce cruising on rivers such as the Mekong and the Irrawaddy. Whilst we're focused on Asia, ocean cruising in this region rebounded from its fall in 2012 to record a 28% increase, taking it to an all-time high of 44,382 passengers. And now holding a 5% share of total Australian cruise passengers, this region is most certainly expected to experience more growth in the coming years as cruise lines significantly expand their capacity and itinerary offerings from China, Japan, Singapore and Hong Kong. When looking at the Americas as a cruise destination in its entirety, we see a further 11% growth on 2012. Within this growth, as you'll see broken down in the printed report, there are a couple of very major highlights. Alaska, the US state that's been very popular from this market for a number of years, achieved its strongest performance ever with 24,121 Australians visiting the last frontier in 2013. That's a 6% increase on 2012 and now surpasses the previous peak of 23,162 that was recorded in 2008. So a great result for Alaska. And the Caribbean, the world's largest cruise destination in terms of passenger numbers and ship deployments, continued on its growth trajectory, luring more than 19,000 Australians to its warm waters in 2013, a 10% rise on 2012 and an increase of almost 350% in just 4 years to the Caribbean. Now, an analysis of the length of cruises Australians took in 2013 shows most cruise duration categories experienced steady growth during the year. And again, you will find details on this in your printed report. However, we wanted to highlight the number of passengers taking 8 to 14-day cruises and how it's increased so dramatically, rising by more than 120,000 to 475,000 passengers. Almost 2/3 of this growth came from a rise in the number of ships homeported in Australia offering cruises to the South Pacific. However, there was also growth in the number of 8 to 14-day cruises taken in Asia, in and around Australia, the Caribbean, Europe and New Zealand during 2013. What this does mean is this category, this duration category, now represents 57% of all cruises, which is quite remarkable. Another important measure of the size and growth of the cruise market is the number of estimated sea days enjoyed by cruise passengers. In 2013, estimated sea days reached 8.7 million, a 22% increase on the 2012 figure of 7.1 million days. Now this equates to an average cruise length of 10.5 days in 2013, slightly more than the 10.3 days recorded in 2012. The printed report will also provide further breakdown between the ocean cruising and river cruising categories, where we see the average ocean cruise length is 10.25 days and the average river cruise length at 14.4 days, quite significant. Both New South Wales and Queensland continue to be the biggest source market for cruises, reflecting their status as the only two states which were home to cruise ships year-round in 2013. New South Wales was the source of more than 340,000 cruises, giving the state a 41.1% market share, as well as a significant population penetration rate of 4.6%. Queensland accounted for 195,000 cruises, representing 23.4% of total numbers and a 4.2% penetration rate. And for those of you that are league fans, please note that we've broken with the CLIA style guidelines here to make sure the appropriate colours were used. Go the Blues. Next best was Victoria with 17%, followed by the remaining states where you can see their contribution tends to reflect their population size. And worthy of note, across the nation, it seems that ACT residents had the biggest propensity to cruise, with the equivalent of an impressive 5.4% of the territory's 382,000 residents taking a cruise in 2013. With so many ships now on offer around the world, the cruise industry continues to attract. As Gavin mentioned, a figure very closely monitored by the first nation on record to surpass North America, which has historically boasted the highest penetration rate as the most mature source market for cruise passengers. In 2013, North America's penetration rate was 3.3%, while the UK and Ireland reported 2.5% and Germany registered 2.1%. So where do we go from here? The target, as Anne mentioned a moment ago, the target of 1 million Australian cruise passengers was once slated for 2020. That could be achieved with only 3% per growth per year from now. More recently, we've spoken about this reaching this number in 2016. Based on the 2013 results, that would require a growth rate of 7% per annum. Easy. So that pretty much brings our presentation to a close. As I said, we will hand out a printed report with much more detail than what I've been able to present here at a high level. Congratulations to everyone in the room. You know, you are a unique audience, and we feel very privileged that you've given your time up to be here today to share this release of information. You've all played a role in this excellent result, so well done. Now, we will take questions from the floor in a moment, but before we do, I'd just like to say a very special thank you to our host today. Thank you to Anne, thank you to Tammy, thank you, yes, thank you, and to the rest of the team at Carnival, and particularly I'd single out Greg Dean, who's been a big help in organising the event today, and also Peter Taylor and Ryan Taylor, who are here today as well. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate your support. I'd also like to acknowledge our 2013 report sponsors, Emirates and Tourism Queensland, both key executive partners of CLIA Australasia. We sincerely appreciate your support. I know Tim Harrowell's here today. Thank you, Tim, you're a big help. I'd also finally like to also acknowledge the efforts of our PR service, which comes from MG Media. Libby Moffat and Christine O'Malley, who are sitting down here. They do an amazing job in helping us to pull this together, and I genuinely appreciate it from a personal point of view. Thank you, and on behalf of the entire industry, your efforts are really appreciated. Thank you very much. Now, if anyone has any questions, we'd be more than happy to take them from the floor now. I'd invite the chairman to join me back on the stage, and if anyone has any questions, now is your opportunity. Thank you. No questions? I'll hold the lip.
Yeah, Ted.
Ted, yes.
Brett, first of all, an excellent presentation, I must say, fantastic. Can you just clarify for us the world's penetration numbers that you presented? the narratives include river. Do they include river in the most of the other nations?
I don't think so. I'd have to clarify that. I'd have to clarify that. I mean, they are all, obviously they're all CLIA members. How they deliver the source market reports in North America. Good question. I'll take that on notice, Ted, and I'll have to come back to you on that.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? There is, yeah, sorry, was there another question down here? I'm blind. Ted, do you have another question?
Well, just in a point of interest, when you look at 2013 versus 2012 for the destinations that we're going to, you can explain, of course, a lot of the growth in the Pacific and Australasia might be increased capacity here, but how do we explain that 2013 is so much better than 2012 in other parts of the world, classical Europe and so on?
Okay, so the question is a lot of the growth in the South Pacific and cruises from Australian ports to in and around Australia and New Zealand has been significant. There's been some increase in capacity, obviously. How do we explain the growth to other regions such as the Med, Northern Europe? Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously the strength of the dollar is still quite healthy, and there is, I think, our retail trade is doing a fabulous job in delivering the message that we want them to be able to deliver in terms of the great value that cruises offer for Australians travelling overseas. And Gavin, do you want to add to that?
I think the economic reality is the softness in economies, especially in Southern Europe and in North America coming out of 2012 meant that by the time the Australian market wakes up about going to Europe and North America, there was still ample availability. So not only did we have a good currency, but aggressive pricing from principals in Europe and North America, we had softness in some of those local source markets. So there was good opportunity for Australians to enjoy those cruises. I think that has continued in 2014. There's been a lot of capacity going into the Caribbean in 2014 in an effort to kind of bulk up in Europe. I don't think the market's particularly responded, and so I think you'll see that the Aussie numbers again for 2014 for Europe, for all brands and for all Australian travel products going to Europe will be very strong because the inventory is available. Currency's settled down there, 92, 93, still good value. So many of those metrics are still in place. And whilst some of the strengthening in North America is seeing our currency come off, but the economies of Southern Europe are showing no huge signs of immediate recovery. Still a lot of product, and that's very positive for Australian holidaymakers. So, I think one of the trends that we're seeing is very much that we're bringing many Australians into the category on beautiful ships such as this, cruising out of Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, around Australia, making the product accessible to Australian households, getting that leading price and that average price into the framework and the perspective of many Australian households. The satisfaction rates, as we say in the industry, are higher than chocolate. So people get on, they enjoy it, they get more than what they bargained for, preaching to the converted, I know, and then they take that passion and they apply that then to the cruises in Europe and North America. So I think those simple dynamics are still in play, and I think you'll see that come through when we look at the 2014 figures.
Gavin, assuming you hit the 1 million figure by 2016, what number can you realistically expect to get by 2020?
Oh, look, I think to give Anne full credit, Anne stood up and said, let's go for something as an industry, and let's be bold. I think what that's given is a framework in which we can have that discussion. I think the reality for the industry is we publish about 2 years in advance, and if you had time at home with your family, you could go through all of the Port Authority published data about the number of ships that are calling into all of the ports around Australia, and you could come up with a 2016 figure that will exceed without any hesitation the 1 million passenger mark, especially the announcement of 2 further ships coming into the P&O brand. What that looks like for 2020 I don't think we have cleared any of our mind to consider. There's a lot of brands in the market, it's extremely competitive, and the relevance of cruising is higher than it's ever been. So it's meant that we're focusing on creating commercially successful brands, putting those in Australian households. But 2020, and we'll have a number, I'm sure, and we'll have a 2020 number. It'll be
2030, 10% market penetration.
Be more people that live in Australia.
2030.
2030, 10% penetration.
Could you give us a figure for 2020 as in passenger numbers?
2020.
Well, you know, if you went 20% a year, I mean, I don't know.
20% a year, you're still looking at
Crazy.
1.6.
It's aggressive.
1.5.
We don't go there.
Given the Australian population of roughly 25 million Australians, 8 million of us travel overseas every year, where's critical mass?
Well, it's a very valid question. So I think what the strength of the industry is and why the industry is being successful is the number of brands that are coming into the market are all investing in the category at a trade and consumer level, and all of the brand identities are becoming more and more apparent. Whereas in years gone by, when there's one or two brands, everybody meets all of the Australian consumers' needs, and it was a fairly homogenous proposition to consumers. What it's about today is very targeted messaging per brand, both for trade and consumers. So I think that's probably the difference between ourselves and North America. We've still got a dependency on retail, high street, travel agency community to do that interpretation, and I think that's why the penetration rate has gone beyond that in North America, which is a largely stay-at-home, home-based travel community. So I don't know, critical mass. We will test it. We will challenge whatever that number is. But I think in all of us put product on the table, be it in media or be it in cruise holidays. And if you get your price right, product right, and if it does what you promise it's going to do, then the industry will still keep being successful. Macca, if you raise your arm again, we'll expect a question. All right, so you can discuss all that at home with your families tonight. I know you'll be very excited to share some of that data. And it is one of the friendly days on